Hey everyone, tarekith here, and today I'm going to be doing a first impressions video on the Teenage Engineering OPXY. This won't be a full review. I haven't had this long enough to feel comfortable like giving you my total final thoughts on this. And unfortunately, I don't have a ton of sound examples from this unit yet either. I did pre-order it when it was announced and got one of the first batches. However, in the last few weeks, I've been trying to wrap up a brand new Digitac 2 live set that I've been working on. I've got a gig at the end of the month, so I really needed to get that kind of finished and complete before I could spend much more time just devoted to the OPXY. I have been using it for about an hour every day though, finding my way around, looking at what's different from the OPZ and the OP1 field. So I'm pretty comfortable with how this works and how it functions, and at least comfortable enough to give you my first thoughts on it. If you've watched my gear reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to throw it up on the desk and take a closer look. So let's do that now and I'll let you know what I think about it. Okay, so here we are zoomed in a little bit on the table so we can take a look at the OPXY a little closer. Right off the bat, I'll say I love the way it looks. My primary hobby outside of making music these last couple of years has been black and white photography. So when I saw that the successor to the OPZ was going to be a monochrome version of the OP1 field, I was sold almost instantly. It looks great in person. It's this nice matte black finish. It doesn't collect fingerprints, which I really like. It's not glossy at all. Everything feels really good quality. They redid the buttons on the OPZ. I will point this out. So they are, let's turn the volume down. They are a little clickier than they were on the OP1 field. I actually kind of prefer the buttons on the OP1 field. They're just quieter and softer. I could use the OP1 field, say like on an airplane or in a library or a quiet coffee shop and not feel like I was bothering the people around me. With the XY, like I'd be a little more conscious about that. They are a little louder and noisier. They feel really, really good quality. And it's not that loud. I just want to point it out. It is a little bit louder than the OP1 field. And I just kind of prefer the softer feel of the OP1 field's keys in general. Again, these feel fine. I'm not complaining about them whatsoever as far as like the build quality or whatever. They feel like they'll last a long time, but I just wanted to point that out. But otherwise, dimensions and the layout is identical to the OP1 field. It feels maybe a tiny little bit heavier, but that could just be me. I haven't actually weighed these yet. Let's quickly kind of cover like the layout of things, just for those of you that aren't familiar with this yet. Starting in the lower left, we've got your plus or minus buttons for transpose. These serve some other functions as well throughout the unit. There's the shift key here for accessing other functionality. I did find it weird that they, right next to the shift key, the very first musical keyboard button, the symbol they use like is an ellipse, which usually means like more, like press for more or like more functionality. So for a long time when I first got this, I kept hitting this button for shift instead of the actual shift button. I've talked to some other people who have made that mistake as well. I'm used to it now, but it's just weird they use that symbol right next to what the shift functionality is going to be. Whatever. There's also transport buttons up here. Stop, play, record. This pattern I'm playing here is just like me messing around. It's not like a final pattern. It's a little cheesy, but it is what it is. You've got your 2 active keyboard buttons. They feel good. It has the same velocity sensitivity as the OP1 field. It uses the built-in gyroscope, I believe, so it's not true velocity sensitivity, but it actually works pretty good in use. You wouldn't know if somebody didn't tell you that. And there's 2 settings. There's like a hard and soft velocity sensitivity. I like the soft, so I don't have to press as hard. Nice to know. Above that's the sequencer buttons, 16-step sequencer. I know there's been a lot of complaints about how Teenage Engineering use like a gradient for this. It's hard for some people to tell like where the 1, the 5, 9, and 13 is. Personally, I haven't had that problem. Like I think, I don't want to discount other people's thoughts, but I think it's kind of overblown. Like I think it's still really easy to see, like, you know, break everything into four sections. Like each of these all the keys in here, like the color changes every 2, and it's pretty obvious to see in use. Plus, if you line up with the top of the unit, you know, like 4 buttons here, 4 buttons here, 4 buttons here, 4 buttons here. Like, I don't know. It just hasn't really been a problem for me to like know at a glance where I am in the sequencer. I don't think they have to like change the colors and things like that. It works just fine as far as I'm concerned. So another nice thing, because they did use white LEDs, is you can dim not only the display, but how bright the LEDs are as well. So if you're playing like on a darker stage, you have a dark studio, that's very, very welcome. Moving on, we have the speaker up top. It sounds fine. It's not like amazing, but it sounds pretty good for the size. You actually get quite a bit of feedback, like haptic feedback from the speaker, like on the low end. It's not quite as precise as the rumble module on the OPZ, I'm definitely going to miss that. I actually really was one of those people who loved the rumble module. It just gave you a really good sense of what was happening in the low end just by holding it. It was just way more accurate than I expected it to be. So I'm going to kind of miss that in the XY, but having this speaker on and turn it up kind of does the same thing. We also have the buttons for selecting our instrument tracks. You have 8 instrument tracks here. This is how you select each track. Let's see, I've got like drums on the first few, bass, whatever, you get it. So in addition to 8 instrument tracks, these can be anything you want. They can be samplers, they can be synths. There's 9 different synths engines. There's a multi-sampler now where you can sample chromatically. Doesn't have a ton of memory. I think you can only get like 4 or 5 samples per preset before you run into sample memory limitations, but it's most welcome. So unlike the OPZ anymore, you don't have to stick with like only samplers on the first 4 tracks and only synth on the last 4 tracks. You can make them all synths, you can make them all samplers, whatever you want. Just keep in mind there is 24 voice polyphony limit on this unit. So far hasn't been a problem, but I wish it was a little higher personally. So this is our instrument button. And next to that we have our aux button. There's 8 aux tracks as well. You've got the brain, which is like an intelligent transposition tool. It does quite a bit more than that. That's just the simple description. You've got your punch-in effects. You've got your MIDI track, MIDI settings, you got your CV settings, your input-output settings. There's the tape track, which is like a real-time sampler. That's the quick and dirty version. You can actually do some really cool things with the tape track. I'm not going to get into right now. It'd take too long. That's on button 6. Button 7 is your effects 1, and button 8 is your effects 2. You have 2 effects per project, and they are send effects globally per project. Sort of, you can change them, which I'll talk about in a second here. The next button is the arranger. This is brand new to the OPXY. This is probably one of the most powerful things about the XY compared to the Z, at least for my use, for live use. You can see here vertically we've got all 8 tracks. And on each track, you can have up to 9 patterns. I don't know why the limit is 9, but the really cool thing about this is that not only can you have up to 9 different patterns per track, each one of those patterns can have a different preset or different sound assigned to it. So in this case, let's see, I've got this hi-hat part on track 3. I'm just holding it down to solo. If you turn the white knob, it'll go to the next pattern, which right now is blank, but let's just put some random stuff in here real quick. So again, hi-hat, and now I use this white knob to go to the next pattern. And there's just like some random bass sound applied to that. But you can assign anything you want. So this is really cool because you can treat each horizontal row as like a song, basically. And then you can switch from one song to the next on a track-by-track basis just by selecting a new pattern on each track. This reminds me of like the old school days with the Roland MC505 and its Megamix functionality. The EMU command stations had the X-Mix functionality. The Roland MC707 has like a Ableton scene grid view. This is kind of similar to that, where you can access like a lot of different sounds from within one project. And for us live performers, like being able to switch on a per track basis is really, really handy. I still can't get over the fact we can have different presets on each pattern. Like that's just amazing. One thing to be aware of though, unlike a lot of other gear like Electron gear or even some of the Roland gear, is that when you change patterns, it always happens on the next step, with whatever your step length is. So for most of the time, that'll be on the next 16th note. So So it doesn't wait till the end of the pattern to switch to the next pattern. So just something to be aware of. Teenage Engineering gear has always worked that way. The OPZ was the same way. So it's one of those things you just have to get used to. But this is really, really powerful for live performers. In addition to that, it's also got like a song mode. So you can, this is like the song arranger. You can specify any pattern from any track as like a scene, and then organize your scenes in song mode. Like I don't have enough patterns in here to really demonstrate that, but so not only is it good for like live use, but if you want like a song mode to do like entire songs on the XY, you have that built into the arranger as well. Moving on, we've got the mixer. The white knob controls the volume per track. The gray knob is pan per track. One of the things I really like about the XY is you can click a parameter a lot of times to reset it back to the default. So if you accidentally make your pan really wild, you can just click it once, go back to center. The dark gray knob and the light gray knob, or I guess they call it medium gray knob, control the sends for the delay and the reverb, which is what I've got mine set to right now. That's it. So pretty useful. It's nice to see at a glance what all your volume levels are, and it also shows you the audio levels on the bottom. You can kind of see which tracks are louder than other tracks and things like that. So it's useful. The only downside is you do have to kind of select, before you can change the volume level of a track, you've got to select it. You can't do like 4 tracks at a time with the knobs, at least currently. It'd be a nice functionality, but it is what it is. The next button we have is the project button. This is where you can load projects, rename them, save your projects. Saving is really, really fast, which I really like. Loading is equally fast. So if you're on stage, it's only like a second or two to load new projects, which is really handy. If you press Shift in Project, this is where you can access the factory content, which can't be deleted, by the way. All your user songs. And then one of the other really nice new features is that for every user song you save, every time you save it, it creates a history file. So if I press History, you can see these are all the different times I've saved this project. And you can go back and load those up. So if you make a mistake and want to go back, it basically gives you like a lot of levels of undo. If you're a live performer, you're going to go and tweak things like crazy when you're on stage. When you're done, you can just go back and load up the previous save file and get back to your starting point again. There's a lot of really good functionality here, and I've never really seen like a history file implemented like this. And apparently it's unlimited history. The downside is that currently there's no way to actually delete any of these history files, like either on device or connected to the computer via MTP. So hopefully they address that soon, because these are just a lot of these history files I might not need. Like, it's cool to go back and see them all, but like maybe I only want to keep like one from every month if I'm working on a big project. Currently we can't do that. So, but again, really, really handy. It's also got an autosave functionality as well. This, to be honest, is kind of confusing. The manual says there's autosave, but then it says don't use autosave. Like there's not a lot of information on like how or when it's auto saving. Is it when you power off? I'm not really sure. So hopefully they'll expand upon that as we go. And you can also duplicate, user projects and things like that as well. So really handy functionality. The next we have the tempo metronome knob. You can change the tempo with the dark gray knob. You can turn the metronome on and off by pressing the button, or change the volume. You can change your swing and your shuffle for globally in the project. One of the other things the XY has over the Z, instead of having just like a standard swing shuffle amount, there's different grooves you can select on a pattern or a project basis. So if we go into the config, each project has like a config menu where you can set like your MIDI channel for each track. There's like a global transpose. And this is where you can choose groove type. It says shuffle right now, but there's like a whole bunch of different grooves in here you can choose. I honestly haven't explored those too much. In addition, you can assign voice assignments. So if you want track 1 to always have 4 voices available, you can set that up in here. I just leave mine on auto most of the time. Oh, excuse me. After that, you've got your 4 buttons, control different parameter pages for synths, samplers, the mixer, things like that. So I selected a synth track here. The first page is the actual engine, the parameters. So you have 4 parameters per engine, which is an improvement over the OPZ, which only had 2. Second page is your envelope pages. We have an amp amplitude now and a filter envelope. You press one of the buttons to access the filter envelope and go back and forth. That's super handy. This is the master filter on a preset. Cut off resonance. This controls the envelope amount, and then key follow. Another cool thing about the XY is we actually have 4 different filters now. So if you hold Shift and press 3, there's 3 different low pass filters and a high pass filter. In addition to that, there's also like a track high pass filter. So if we hold Shift and press the instrument button, we actually have a high pass filter per track as well. And this is separate from the main filter on each track. This is great because, a lot of times on the OPZ, I'd have this really great sound, but we'd have just booming super sub bass. And this way you can kind of tame that a little bit for live use or just, mixing in the box in general. You can change the velocity sensitivity per track, what key and scale it's in, your portamento types. In addition, you have all your different mod wheel targets. So if you have a controller with mod wheel hooked up to it, you can change that. There is a pitch bend button on this. It's the same location as the OPZ, but I find it much easier to control. One thing to point out on the hardware front is if you have a deck saver from like your OP1 field or an OP1, it will fit on the OPZ. However, the edge of the deck saver does kind of press against this pitch bend here. I'd use a Dremel to kind of cut mine just so it's not putting too much pressure on it when I put it in a case or in a backpack. If it's just sitting on your desk like this, it's probably not a big deal, but if you're going to carry it like in an analog case or something like that, just something to be aware of. You might want to modify that deck saver so it's not pinching on the pitch bend mod, the little pitch bend button all the time. Let's see. So we have our mixer here. We also have different pages in the mixer. We've got, this is like your master EQ. There's also a master compressor / kind of distortion. It sounds good. You can get like crazy distorted with it, or you can just have it like add some subtle grit to it or just a little bit of warmth. And then you have the final output. You can mix between your percussion and melodic parts. This is kind of hit or miss. Anything that's basically done in a drum sampler engine becomes the XY considers as percussion, and everything else it does melodic, as well as there's the master output as well. So. Yeah, so again, these 4 buttons, how you access all the different parameters for all the different pages. We've already covered the 8 buttons to select tracks and aux tracks, as well as the knobs themselves. They are detented knobs, just so you know, but it's a very fine detent, so it's not that bad. The next button up here is this is a sampling button, so you can very quickly sample things by choosing the input for it. Let's see, which button was it? There we go. Currently, there's a bug in the latest firmware where you can't actually monitor anything you're recording with the microphone through like headphones unless something's plugged into the input of the unit. They've confirmed it's a bug. Hopefully it should get addressed soon. The mic itself sounds great. It sounds just as good as the one on the OP1 field. I have no problem using it for a lot of things. In addition, the other big change on the XY when it comes to samples is that previously on the OPZ, if you wanted to use your own samples on the first 4 tracks, you had to put all the different samples into one WAV file, and then the unit would slice those up into 24 slices for you automatically. And there are some software tools like the OP1 drum utility, I think it's called. But it was kind of a pain to have like all your drum sounds always saved like in a kit in one audio file. Now we can assign samples on a track-by-track basis. So if I don't like this kick, I can just go shift sample. I've got my kicks in here. And that's it. I can assign a new kick that easily. So it's nice that they've given us like, the fact, I think it's got, if I remember right, it's got 8 gigabytes of total memory storage space. So we can load our own sample libraries on here. Unfortunately, there's some kind of gotchas with this. The first is you have to be very specific or very careful with how your folders and your files are named. I think the limit is 14 characters right now, at least for folders. Anything more than that, people have been having problems transferring it to the unit. The other thing you have to keep in mind is like your folder hierarchy. The OPXY only supports 1 folder deep in the sample library. So like right here, I've got some different sample packs, like this Field Aurora sample pack. I've got all my samples in this folder, but I can't add another folder inside of that folder. So say I wanted to have like a folder called in the sample library, just called drums, and I wanted like a separate folder for kick and a separate folder for snares. Like unfortunately on the XY currently you can't do that. It won't let you load it or it just gives you error messages. So everything can only be like kind of 1 folder deep right now, which is kind of a shame. The other kind of annoying thing is that for each of, say, like the synthesizer presets, you can save these as presets and share them. And you can even like sample things and save like a sampled instrument as a preset. And it'll save like a JSON file with like all the settings for that preset, as well as like the actual sample itself in the preset. So let's say like just recently I bought a sample pack and it came with like, oops, let's get this one. Let's get on a drum kit. There we go. So I bought a preset pack. It had like 40 presets, and each preset had its own sample, so 40 samples. I loaded those via the field kit utility onto the unit. That all went fine, but it copied all of the samples into the top level folder of the sample file. So I've got the sample folder, and you can see I've got my all these little folders up here. I have like a little dash in front of them, so they go to the top alphabetically, but all my preset samples are just in this big list now. So like if I wanted to find my own folders and hadn't put like a little dash in front of them to make them go to the top, I'd have to go through the whole list to find them. Like for instance, like the user folder, everything you sample goes in this user folder, but it's like buried in all the samples that were with the presets. which is kind of annoying. I wish if they were going to actually like display the samples from the presets in the sample folder, they would put them in the same folder as the presets, or just some kind of organization better than just putting them all in the top level directory. It doesn't make much sense to me. Hopefully that gets addressed too. But other than that, it's still really nice having like all my built-in samples or all my sample libraries on board to use in projects without having to like do any prep work like ahead of time on the computer, or fine tune like slice points manually on the unit itself. Although you can still do that if you want to. Again, just this quick overview. We're not going to go too deep here. So the next button is your communications buttons. This is where all your system settings are. This is where you can see your battery charge limit. On the OP1 field, you can see the battery charge here by holding a key combination down. Currently on the XY, you can't. You can only see it here in the screen. Hopefully they change that. You can calibrate your pitch bend knob that was just added in 1.0.13 update. You've got your system settings. I mentioned you can change the brightness of the display and the brightness of the keys, which is really, really nice. And as well, it does also, you can change the power off settings. So you can make it so as soon as you click the power button, it turns off instantly, or you can click the power button, you have to press COM to turn it off. So if you hit it by mistake, you can still save the day and not have your unit shut off in the middle of the show. Again, you can change the velocity setting for the keyboard and stuff. This is basically all your general system settings. The XY does have a multi-output jack. You can read more about it on the TE website, but basically this output jack, there's your main output I'm using now. It's also a headphone output, and there's what they call the multi-output jack, which can be MIDI out, CV out, audio out. You have to configure all that here, which is really, really nice. In addition, you can put this into control mode. So if you wanted to use the OPXY as like a MIDI controller for Ableton Live or something like that, it's got a dedicated knob or mode, so all the knobs and buttons send MIDI CCs in a nice, easy way. So you can just go ahead and enter that mode. Second to last button that's new here is our players button. This is really nice. This is one of the other great improvements over the OPY. I'm sorry, the OPZ. You can see here I've got an arpeggio assigned. You can change the resolution, what kind of arpeggio it is, how many octaves, and a hold. Super nice. I love having an arpeggio finally on this. There's two other options as well if you hold shift. There's a hold player. Basically, just hold each note until the next note plays. I don't really have a use for that myself, but it's good it's there, I guess. And the last one that's kind of cool is this Maestro. So Maestro lets you do kind of strumming effects and play chords. So if you hold shift and press a few keys, let's see. So now I've pressed 3 keys. Let's see. Well, it's not really playing chords. I've got this set to monophonic, this part, so it's not playing chords, but you can play chords with it that way, as well as do like cool strumming effects. So yeah, Maestro and arpeggio, pretty cool. I'm glad they added those, something I'll use quite a lot. And the last button here is this bar button, and this is another big improvement. On the OPZ, you only had 1 bar of 16 steps. You could change the step length on that, but the most you could get out of that was, I think, 32 bars, if I remember right. I could be wrong on that. But now we have 4 bars we can choose. So you hold the button down and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You can change how many bars are in each track by pressing the plus and minus. If you had like a bunch of notes recorded on just 1 bar and wanted to duplicate those, you would hold shift and press plus or minus to duplicate those. You can also set the track scale, like I said. So now we've got 4 bars, and I can set the track scale up to 16. That means that each step will play for 16 steps before it moves to the next one. So in effect, this means that you don't have 4 bars per per track. You can have up to 64 bars per track. You just have to play in real time to actually get full access to all those, because each button you press on the sequencer will be, 16 notes long. But still, it's pretty cool to have 64 bars on a per track basis. And because I believe it has, 1,192 pulses per quarter note resolution. If you play in real time, it sounds freely played. It doesn't sound quantized at all, which is really, really nice. You can also set the quantization for anything you play, the length of any notes you play, and this is per track setting. This is where you choose how much groove to apply in a per track. And then the other cool thing is it's got this new shape parameter. You can record automation on the XY just like the OPZ. You hold record down, turn a knob. But now you can choose to have that automation recorded on a per step basis. So like parameter locks, like say electron gears, where every single step it'll jump to the next value, or you can smooth it out so it slowly changes from parameter, step to step by just turning the shape knob. Anyway, it's nice. You can just have, you can have your parameter automation like stepped and really quick, or you can have it smooth out almost like an LFO, which is really good. So yeah, it's a quick walkthrough how everything works, how it's laid out. There's some really, really nice improvements over the OPZ. Having the arpeggios, the players, having longer bars, better effects quality. The reverb on here sounds kind of on par with Mother from the OP1 Field. They have different vibes, but it's equally as good in its own way. This arrange view for me is a huge game changer. Just the fact that like I said, I can have like each scene or each horizontal row be like a separate song and then transition through a whole set just on a per track by track basis is really awesome. So I'm excited to dive into this and create a new live set with it. As I mentioned, I haven't been able to yet, but that is next on my list of things to do. And once I spend some more time with that, maybe get a live set recorded with it, I'll come back and do like a full review on the OPXY. But so far right now, I'm really, really happy with it. It does a lot of things just right for the way I like to perform, and I think it was a worthy upgrade to the OPZ. Let's take a step back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, so that was a little bit of a closer look at some of the features and functionality of the XY. As you can tell, I'm a big fan. I've waited a long time for the successor to the OPZ, especially once the OP1 Field was announced. It seemed kind of obvious. While it's not quite what I was expecting, or maybe what a lot of people were expecting the OPZ Field to be, it actually exceeded all my expectations. It's an absolutely gorgeous looking unit. It's well made. I think they've taken a lot of user requests on board as they've redone the operating system. The OS is a little rougher on the edges still, but they seem to be pushing out updates pretty regularly, so hopefully some of that stuff gets addressed. Again, if you saw some of the things I was complaining about or pointed out, those are all with the current operating system, which is 1.0.13, I believe. So if you're watching this later on, a couple months after it was made, maybe some of those things are addressed already. But overall, I'm really, really happy with this. I think it's going to be a great live performance tool, just like the OPZ was. It's easier to use. It's a lot easier to carry around. It's more robust. Hopefully we won't have some of the hardware issues a lot of people saw in the original OPZ. And I'm really looking forward to kind of diving in now that my Digitac 2 live set's just about wrapped up. So anyway, that was just a first look. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for the full review. Thanks.